I'm Garrett Mitchell, 32, and until last year, I thought I had it all figured out. Great job as a software developer, a beautiful fiancée named Jessica, and what I believed was a solid relationship with my younger brother Ryan. Then one day, everything shattered. Ryan stole Jessica right from under me, and 8 months later, I found a wedding invitation in my mailbox. I almost threw it away, but something told me to go. What happened at that ceremony changed everything. Before I get into the whole story, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how I turned the ultimate betrayal into the best thing that ever happened to me. Growing up with Ryan wasn't easy. Being just 2 years apart meant we were close enough in age to be compared constantly, but different enough that those comparisons always stung. From the beginning, Ryan seemed determined to one-up me in everything I did. If I joined the baseball team, he'd try out too and practice twice as long. When I brought home a B+ on a math test, he'd somehow pull an A. It wasn't friendly competition, it was his mission. Our parents, Harold and Margaret Mitchell, didn't help the situation. Dad was a high school football coach with a perpetual competitive streak, and Mom worked as an accountant who tracked everything with precision. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became a phrase I heard regularly, regardless of which of us was temporarily in favor. I still remember my 10th birthday when I got a new bicycle, a red Schwinn I'd been eyeing for months. 2 weeks later, Ryan deliberately damaged it by riding it down the rocky hill behind our house in Portland. When confronted, he claimed he was just testing it out. My parents made him apologize, but I caught that little smirk afterward. That bike incident was just the beginning. By high school, Ryan's competitive nature evolved into something more calculated. Freshman year, I spent 3 months working up the courage to ask Melanie Parker to the winter formal. The day I planned to ask her, Ryan appeared at lunch with his arm around her shoulders, announcing they were going together. He claimed he had no idea I was interested, despite hearing me talk about her constantly. This pattern repeated with Amber in sophomore year and Caitlin in junior year. By senior year, I stopped mentioning girls I liked around him. When I did start dating Diane, I kept it quiet for weeks. Ryan eventually found out, and, though he couldn't steal her away, he made sure to point out all my flaws whenever she was around. College gave me the space I needed. I headed to MIT for computer science while Ryan stayed local at Portland State, pursuing a business degree he never quite seemed passionate about. Those 4 years allowed me to discover who I was without constantly looking over my shoulder. I built meaningful friendships, especially with my roommate Trevor, who became the brother I wished I'd had. After graduation, I landed a job at a growing tech company in Seattle. I threw myself into work, developing software for financial systems. Meanwhile, Ryan bounced between marketing jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a year. He'd call occasionally, usually when he needed something. Despite our history, I wanted to believe we could have a better relationship as adults. When Ryan lost his apartment after being laid off in 2019, I let him stay in my spare room for 3 months. I even paid his security deposit for his next place and connected him with a friend at a marketing agency who helped him land a job. For a while, it seemed like we'd turned a corner. We'd grab beers occasionally, watch Seahawks games together, and even took a weekend fishing trip with Dad. Ryan appeared grateful for my help, and I thought maybe he'd finally outgrown his need to compete with me. He'd tell me about his dates and relationships, and none of them triggered any warning bells. I genuinely believed we were building a healthier brotherhood. My career continued to advance as I moved into senior development roles. Ryan seemed proud of me, introducing me as his genius brother to his friends. Meanwhile, he still struggled financially, frequently changing jobs and complaining about bad bosses or toxic workplaces. I never pointed out the common denominator in all these situations was him. When he needed $5,000 for car repairs in early 2021, I transferred it to his account without hesitation. "I'll pay you back as soon as my commission check comes through," he promised. I never saw that money again, but I wrote it off as the cost of maintaining peace. Family was family, after all. That summer, we even planned a surprise party for our parents' 30th anniversary. Working together on something positive felt good, and when the party went off without a hitch, I thought maybe we'd finally established a mature relationship. Mom commented on how wonderful it was to see her boys getting along so well. Looking back, I realized I was setting myself up for what came next. I'd lowered my guard completely. The wary, protective stance I'd maintained throughout our childhood had fallen away. I wanted so badly to believe Ryan had changed that I ignored all the evidence that he was still the same person who'd spent his life trying to take what was mine. Little did I know that the worst betrayal was yet to come, one that would make all those childhood bike incidents and stolen dates seem trivial by comparison. I met Jessica Reed at a tech conference in Vancouver in January 2022. I was presenting on security protocols for financial software, and she was representing her marketing agency. After my talk, she approached with thoughtful questions about how to explain complex security features to average consumers. Her intelligence immediately struck me. This wasn't someone just making conversation. With dark hair, bright blue eyes, and a quick laugh, Jessica was undeniably attractive, but it was her sharp mind that really drew me in. When I suggested continuing our conversation over coffee, she countered with dinner instead. "I never rush good conversations," she said with a confidence I found refreshing. That first date lasted 4 hours. We talked about everything from our careers to our shared love of hiking the Pacific Northwest trails. Jessica had grown up in California but moved to Seattle for college and never left. She worked as a marketing director for a mid-sized agency, specializing in tech clients. She was ambitious, planning to start her own agency within 5 years. Jessica had an infectious enthusiasm for life that pulled me out of my workaholic tendencies. On our third date, she convinced me to try indoor rock climbing, something I'd always avoided due to my mild fear of heights. By the end of the session, I'd made it halfway up the wall and couldn't wait to try again. Our relationship progressed naturally. Within 2 months, we were spending most weekends together. By 4 months, she had a drawer at my place. At 6 months, we were discussing moving in together. Everything felt right, like I'd finally found someone who understood me completely. Jessica fit into my life seamlessly. Trevor and his wife Amanda adored her, and my coworkers always asked when she'd be joining us for happy hours. She was the perfect blend of supportive and challenging, pushing me to advance in my career while making sure I didn't burn myself out. After dating for 8 months, I decided it was time to introduce Jessica to my family. We drove to Portland for Labor Day weekend to meet my parents and Ryan. I was nervous given Ryan's history, but I also felt secure in what Jessica and I had built. Besides, Ryan had been dating someone named Megan for a few months, according to my mom. The weekend started well. My parents immediately took to Jessica, especially when they discovered her father had coached high school basketball. Dad launched into coaching stories while Mom appreciated Jessica's interest in her container gardening hobby. Ryan arrived for dinner alone, explaining that Megan had a work commitment. From the moment he walked in, something felt off. He hugged Jessica a beat too long in greeting, and his eyes followed her around the room. I dismissed these observations as paranoia born from our history. During dinner, Ryan was uncharacteristically interested in my relationship. "How did you manage to land someone like Jessica?" he asked with a laugh that only I recognized as slightly hostile. He spent the evening telling animated stories that kept everyone entertained, particularly Jessica, who seemed charmed by his energy. As the night progressed, I noticed Jessica laughing more at Ryan's jokes than seemed necessary. When he offered to help her clear the dessert plates, they spent 15 minutes in the kitchen while the rest of us sat in the living room. I heard her laugh, that full, uninhibited laugh that I loved, multiple times. On the drive back to Seattle the next day, Jessica commented. Your brother is nothing like you described. He's actually really funny and sweet. I mumbled something noncommittal, trying to ignore the familiar warning bells. 2 weeks after that visit, I was promoted to lead developer on a major project. The new responsibilities meant longer hours temporarily, but also a significant salary increase. Jessica was supportive, bringing dinner to the office when I worked late, and creating a dedicated workspace in our apartment for days I worked from home. By our 1-year anniversary, I knew Jessica was who I wanted to spend my life with. I planned an elaborate proposal at Canlis, her favorite restaurant in Seattle. When I dropped to one knee beside the table overlooking Lake Union, her hands flew to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Yes! 1,000 times yes! She exclaimed before I even finished asking the question. The ring, a princess-cut diamond with sapphires on either side, slid perfectly onto her finger. The other diners applauded, and the restaurant brought us champagne. It was exactly the magical moment I'd hoped for. Jessica immediately dove into wedding planning, creating Pinterest boards and researching venues. We settled on a date the following September, giving us plenty of time to plan. She asked her college roommate Natalie to be her maid of honor, and I naturally asked Trevor to be my best man. When Trevor and I met for beers the following week, I expected enthusiastic congratulations. Instead, he seemed hesitant. You sure about this, man? It feels kinda fast, he said, picking at the label on his beer bottle. When you know, I replied defensively. Trevor nodded but added, I just want to make sure you're seeing the whole picture. Sometimes Jessica seems a bit, I don't know, like she's performing rather than being genuine. I dismissed his concerns as typical pre-marriage jitters from a friend. Trevor had always been protective since our college days, and I appreciated his concern even if I thought it was misplaced. Around this time, my work project entered its critical phase. The financial software platform we were developing had encountered security vulnerabilities that needed immediate addressing. For about 6 weeks, I was working 12-hour days, coming home exhausted. Jessica seemed understanding at first, but gradually grew distant. She started declining Trevor and Amanda's invitations for dinner, saying she was giving me space to work. She texted more than she talked when we were home together. If I asked if something was wrong, she'd smile and say everything was fine, just busy with work. I did notice she was on her phone constantly, but always angled away from me. When I'd enter a room, she'd quickly lock the screen. Once, I caught a glimpse of what looked like Ryan's profile picture on her screen before she turned it away. When I asked who she was texting, she said it was Natalie about bridesmaid dresses. Despite these subtle changes, I was still happier than I'd ever been. I had the career I'd worked toward, a beautiful fiancée, and what I thought was a bright future ahead. I even called Ryan to ask if he'd be one of my groomsmen, wanting to include him in this important milestone. He sounded oddly hesitant but eventually agreed. Little did I know that my entire world was about to come crashing down, and the two people I should have been able to trust would be the ones holding the sledgehammer. March 17th, 2023, a date permanently etched in my memory. My team had finally resolved the critical issues with the project, and I decided to surprise Jessica by coming home early. I stopped to pick up flowers and her favorite takeout from the Thai place she loved. I imagined a romantic evening reconnecting after weeks of work stress. When I arrived at our apartment at 2 p.m., it was empty. Not unusual, Jessica often worked until 6. I set up dinner, chilled a bottle of wine, and decided to charge her Bluetooth speaker for music later. That's when I saw it. Her iPad was on the coffee table, and a text notification from Ryan appeared on the screen. I'd never snooped through Jessica's devices before. I trusted her completely. But something about seeing my brother's name triggered an instinct I couldn't ignore. I tapped the notification. What I found destroyed me. Hundreds of messages between them going back nearly 3 months. Flirtatious at first, then explicit. Plans to meet when I was working late. Photos I still wish I could scrub from my memory. And worse, discussions about me. He has no idea, Jessica had written. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember how much better we are together. Ryan's response. He'll get over it. He always does. You were meant to be with me anyway. I sat there for hours, scrolling through their betrayal, each message another knife in my chest. They'd been sleeping together for weeks. Right under my nose. All those nights Jessica said she was giving me space to work. Or having drinks with coworkers. She'd been with my brother. When Jessica walked in at 6:30 p.m., her smile faltered at the sight of the flowers, food, and my tear-streaked face. What's wrong? She asked, setting down her purse. Where were you today? My voice was barely recognizable. At work, where else would I be? She tried to sound confused, but her eyes darted to her iPad on the table. Try again. I turned the screen toward her, showing the messages. What followed was a masterclass in gaslighting. First came denial. The messages were taken out of context. Then anger. I had violated her privacy. Finally, deflection. I'd been emotionally absent for months. What did I expect? It just happened, she eventually admitted, tears streaming down her face. We didn't mean to hurt you. Things don't just happen, Jessica. You make choices. Every text, every lie, every time you slept with him, those were all choices. I love him, Garrett. 5 simple words that demolished what remained of my heart. I think I always have, since that first weekend. The way he sees me, understands me. I stood up, unable to bear another word. Your engagement ring is on the counter. I want you gone by morning. Garrett, please, we need to talk about this rationally. Rationally? I laughed bitterly. Would you like to rationally discuss how my brother and fiancé have been fucking behind my back? Or maybe rationally plan how to divide our belongings while you move in with him? She flinched at my words but didn't deny her intentions. I never meant for this to happen, she said softly. I did love you, Garrett. Just not the way I love Ryan. Those words hurt worse than anger would have. The calm certainty in her voice made it clear this wasn't a mistake or a temporary lapse in judgment. She had chosen my brother and was only sorry she got caught. Jessica packed a suitcase that night. I slept on Trevor's couch, unable to watch her dismantle our life together. When I returned the next day, most of her things were gone, along with the engagement ring. She'd left her key on the kitchen counter with a note. I truly am sorry for how this happened. You deserve better than either of us. I tried calling Ryan immediately after discovering the affair. He sent me to voicemail repeatedly. When I texted, demanding an explanation, he replied only, "We need time before we talk about this. I never wanted to hurt you." I drove to his apartment that weekend, fueled by rage and whiskey, not my finest moment. He refused to open the door, telling me through the wood that he'd call the police if I didn't leave. I could hear Jessica inside, telling him to come away from the door. My parents' reactions split along predictable lines. Mom was horrified, calling both Ryan and Jessica several times a day until they blocked her number. Dad, however, took a "these things happen" approach that felt like another betrayal. Brothers compete for women. It's biology, he said during an awkward phone call. Jessica made her choice. Best to move on. I didn't speak to either of my parents for several weeks after that conversation. The next month passed in a blur of depression. I took a leave of absence from work, barely ate. Ryan. Support their happiness? The audacity was breathtaking. I ripped the invitation to shreds, threw it in the trash, and poured myself a scotch, my first in nearly 2 months. That weekend, Trevor and Amanda invited me over for dinner. I mentioned the invitation, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. Those self-absorbed assholes, Amanda said, refilling my wine glass. Please tell me you threw it away. Immediately, I confirmed. Can you imagine? Inviting me to watch them get married? On what was supposed to be my wedding day. Trevor, however, looked thoughtful. Maybe you should go. Have you lost your mind? Amanda and I asked simultaneously. Hear me out, Trevor said, leaning forward. Right now, they think they've won. They think they broke you. What better revenge than showing up looking fantastic, successful, and completely over them? With a gorgeous date on your arm. Amanda added, warming to the idea. Someone who makes Jessica look like a consolation prize. The idea was absurd. Attending would be torture. Yet over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if I did show up? What if I demonstrated that their betrayal hadn't destroyed me? The image was satisfying, but the prospect of finding a date willing to enter that snake pit seemed impossible. Then fate intervened in the form of a coffee shop and a spilled latte. I was working remotely at Elm Coffee Roasters when someone bumped my table, sending my drink flying onto my laptop. As I frantically dabbed at my keyboard with napkins, a voice beside me said, "Tilt it upside down and let it drain. Don't turn it on again for at least 24 hours." I looked up to see a woman with striking amber eyes and a concerned expression. "I've rescued 3 laptops that way," she continued. "I'm Samantha, by the way. Let me buy you a replacement drink since I made you spill yours." "You didn't bump my table," I pointed out. "No, but that guy already left, and you look like you're having a rough day." She smiled, and something in my chest shifted. While waiting for our drinks, I learned Samantha Wells was a neurosurgeon at Harborview Medical Center. She was brilliant, articulate, and unexpectedly funny for someone who operated on brains for a living. When she mentioned being new to Seattle, having moved from San Francisco 6 months ago, I offered some local recommendations. What I'd intended as a quick coffee turned into a 3-hour conversation. We exchanged numbers, and I found myself texting her that evening to thank her for the coffee and company. To my surprise, she suggested dinner the following night. Our first official date was at a small Italian restaurant in Capitol Hill. Samantha arrived in a simple black dress that made her look both elegant and approachable. Over pasta and wine, we shared stories about our lives. I found myself opening up about the betrayal. Something I rarely did with new people. "That's remarkably similar to what happened to me," she said after I finished. "My fiancée left me for my cousin last year. We'd been together since medical school. That shared experience created an immediate bond between us. Samantha understood the humiliation, the self-doubt, the rage that followed such a personal betrayal in a way others couldn't. Our second date was a hike to Wallace Falls, where conversation flowed as easily as on our first meeting. By our third date, a cooking class where we botched a soufflé so badly the instructor used it as an example of what not to do, I realized I was developing genuine feelings for Samantha. 2 weeks after meeting her, while walking along Alki Beach watching the sunset over the Seattle skyline, I found myself staring at the wedding invitation I'd rescued from the trash and taped back together. "What's that?" Samantha asked, noticing my distraction. I explained the situation, the invitation, Trevor's suggestion to attend with a date, my conflicted feelings about the whole thing. To my surprise, Samantha's eyes lit up. "We should absolutely go." "What? Why would you want to put yourself in that situation?" "Because I've been exactly where you are," she said, taking my hand. "After my breakup, I avoided all mutual friends and family gatherings because I couldn't bear to face them. I let them drive me out of my own life. I've always regretted not standing my ground." Her enthusiasm was contagious. "Are you sure? It's going to be awkward as hell." "Oh, I'm counting on it." She grinned. "Besides, I look amazing in formal wear." That weekend, we went shopping for outfits. Samantha selected a stunning emerald green dress that hugged her curves perfectly. I invested in a new charcoal suit that fit better than anything I'd owned before. For the first time, I began looking forward to the wedding, if only to see the looks on Ryan and Jessica's faces when they saw us together. As the wedding date approached, my anxiety returned. I called Dr. Marquez for an emergency session. "Are you attending for the right reasons?" she asked. "Revenge rarely provides the satisfaction we expect." "It's not just about revenge," I insisted. "It's about reclaiming my dignity. Showing them that they didn't break me." Dr. Marquez nodded. "Just be prepared for it to be harder than you anticipate. And make sure Samantha understands what she's walking into." The night before the wedding, Trevor came over to help me prepare. He brought a bottle of good scotch, though we limited ourselves to one glass each. "Remember," he said as I tried on my suit one last time, "you're not there to cause a scene. You're there to show them you've moved on to something better." "Something better," I repeated, adjusting my tie. "I think I actually have." As I fell asleep that night, I realized that regardless of what happened at the wedding, meeting Samantha had already transformed my pain into something unexpected. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. The morning of September 30th dawned clear and crisp, perfect weather for a wedding. As I drove along Hood Canal with Samantha beside me, I fluctuated between confidence and panic. She seemed to sense my anxiety, reaching over occasionally to squeeze my hand. "Remember," she said as we approached Alderbrook Resort, "we're not here to cause drama. We're here to show them you're thriving. Keep your head high and your responses polite." Samantha looked absolutely stunning. Her emerald dress complemented her auburn hair, which she'd styled in an elegant updo. With minimal makeup highlighting her amber eyes and high cheekbones, she looked sophisticated yet approachable. I felt a surge of pride walking beside her. We arrived 30 minutes before the ceremony. The resort's grounds were beautifully decorated with white roses and blue hydrangeas, flowers Jessica had once told me she wanted for our wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Heads turned as we entered the reception area where guests were gathering before the ceremony. I recognized family members and mutual friends, their expressions ranging from shock to pity to curiosity. My cousin Blake approached first, giving me an awkward half-hug. "Didn't expect to see you here, man," he said, eyes darting between me and Samantha. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied with a smile that felt only slightly forced. "Blake, this is Samantha Wells." "Samantha, my cousin Blake." Word of my arrival spread quickly. Soon my mother appeared, looking uncomfortable in a navy dress I'd never seen before. "Garrett," she said, embracing me tightly, "I wasn't sure you'd come." She turned to Samantha with a warm smile. "I'm Margaret, Garrett's mother." "Lovely to meet you," Samantha replied smoothly. "Your son speaks very highly of you." As we chatted, I spotted Ryan across the room. Our eyes met, and for a moment, he looked genuinely startled. He whispered something to a groomsman beside him, then made his way over with obvious reluctance. "Garrett," he said stiffly, "I didn't think you'd come." "You invited me," I replied simply. An uncomfortable silence followed before Ryan turned to Samantha. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Ryan." "The groom. Samantha Wells," she responded, offering her hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Congratulations on your wedding day." Ryan mumbled thanks, made a vague comment about needing to check on something, and retreated quickly. The encounter was brief but satisfying. He'd clearly been thrown off balance by my presence. My father approached next, looking distinguished in his tuxedo. Unlike my mother, he seemed unsurprised to see me. "Good for you, son," he said quietly, clapping me on the shoulder. "Takes courage to show up." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd get for his earlier dismissal of the betrayal. As guests were ushered toward the ceremony area, I caught sight of Jessica for the first time. She was being escorted to a side room, presumably for final preparations. Our eyes met briefly across the lobby, and the color drained from her face. She quickly looked away, whispering urgently to her bridesmaid. The ceremony was held in a glass-walled pavilion overlooking Hood Canal. Samantha and I selected seats toward the back, giving us a clear view while maintaining some distance from the main action. As the music began and the wedding party processed in, I felt a strange detachment, as if watching a movie about someone else's life. When Jessica appeared in her white gown, simpler than the elaborate dress she'd planned for our wedding, I waited for the pain to hit. Instead, I felt a dull ache tinged with pity. She looked beautiful but tense, her smile not reaching her eyes as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Throughout the ceremony, I noticed Jessica glancing in our direction several times. Ryan, in contrast, seemed determined not to look at us at all. Their vows were standard, lacking the personal touches Jessica had once insisted were essential for a meaningful ceremony. "Are you okay?" Samantha whispered, squeezing my hand. "Surprisingly, yes," I whispered back. And it was true. The ceremony that should have devastated me instead felt like watching the closing of a door, final, but necessary. After the ceremony, guests moved to the resort's ballroom for the reception. Samantha and I considered leaving, having made our point by attending the ceremony, but decided to stay for dinner. "Besides," Samantha joked, "I hear the salmon here is excellent." We were seated at a table with distant relatives and friends who didn't know the full story of what had happened. This made conversation easier, focusing on neutral topics like my work and Samantha's recent move to Seattle. Several people commented on what a lovely couple we made, causing me to exchange amused glances with Samantha. Dinner passed without incident, and I began to think we might escape without any real drama. Then came the speeches. Jessica's father spoke first, delivering a generic welcome. The maid of honor followed with anecdotes about Jessica's college days. Then Ryan stood, champagne flute in hand, and my stomach tightened. He started with standard thanks to guests for attending, comments about how beautiful Jessica looked, and jokes about married life. Then, after a pause that lasted a beat too long, he added, "Some of you know that Jessica and I had an unconventional start." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "I want to address something directly, especially since my brother Garrett was generous enough to join us today." The room went quiet. I felt every eye turned toward me. Jessica and I never meant to hurt anyone. But sometimes the heart wants what it wants. Ryan looked directly at me for the first time that day. "The truth is, Jessica was engaged to Garrett first. He's the one she settled for before realizing what she really wanted." Shocked murmurs spread through the room. Jessica tugged at Ryan's sleeve, her face horrified, but he continued. "I guess I should thank you, bro," Ryan said, raising his glass in my direction, "for being her practice run until she found the real thing." Some guests laughed uncomfortably. Others looked mortified. My mother had her head in her hands. I sat frozen, humiliation burning through me. After everything, he still needed to publicly stake his claim, to twist the knife one final time. Beside me, Samantha slowly stood, smoothing her dress. The room quieted as she picked up her champagne glass. "I'd like to say something as well," she announced in a clear, confident voice. Ryan looked annoyed at the interruption. "I'm sorry, and you are Samantha Wells, Garrett's date." She smiled pleasantly. "I just wanted to congratulate you both and correct a small misconception." The silence in the room was absolute now. Garrett isn't someone anyone settles for. He's brilliant, kind, and loyal to a fault. She looked directly at Jessica. As for being a practice run, that implies he was somehow inadequate, when in reality, he was simply too good for both of you. Jessica's face had gone pale. Ryan looked like he'd been slapped. "In my professional experience," Samantha continued, "people who betray those closest to them are usually compensating for their own inadequacies. So congratulations on finding each other, you deserve one another." She raised her glass. "To the happy couple. And Garrett? He's not someone's consolation prize. I'm actually his upgrade." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Ryan started to respond, but Jessica grabbed his arm. Her expression panicked. It took me a moment to realize why. Jessica was staring at Samantha with dawning recognition. "Dr. Wells?" she said, barely audible over the murmurs. "From San Francisco Memorial?" Samantha smiled. "Hello, Jessica. I'm surprised you remember me. You only worked in my department for what, 3 months? Before that unfortunate incident with the research files." The color drained completely from Jessica's face. Several guests were now openly staring between them. "You two know each other?" Ryan asked, confusion replacing anger. "Jessica was briefly part of my research team in San Francisco," Samantha explained calmly, "before she was asked to leave for ethical violations. I didn't make the connection until I saw her today. She looks quite different now." Jessica grabbed Ryan's arm. "Let's sit down. This isn't the time." "What ethical violations?" Ryan persisted, shaking off her hand. The room had gone completely silent. Jessica's father half rose from his seat, as if to intervene, then sank back down. Samantha shrugged elegantly. "Hospital confidentiality prevents me from elaborating. I'm sure Jessica can explain it to you privately." She set down her glass. "We should probably go, Garrett. I believe we've overstayed our welcome." As we turned to leave, the silence in the room was deafening. I caught my father's eye. He gave me a slight nod that felt like vindication. My mother was openly smiling through tears. We were nearly at the door when Jessica's voice rang out. "You planned this, didn't you, Garrett? You brought her here to humiliate me." I turned back slowly. "I had no idea you knew each other, Jessica. Unlike you and Ryan, I don't orchestrate betrayals." With that, I took Samantha's hand, and we walked out of the ballroom with our heads held high, leaving chaos in our wake. The moment the ballroom doors closed behind us, I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding all day. Samantha and I walked in silence through the resort lobby and out to the parking area before either of us spoke. "So," I finally said, "you knew Jessica?" Samantha leaned against my car, the evening breeze gently disturbing wisps of hair around her face. "I recognized her from your photos when we first started dating, but I wasn't completely sure until today." She looked different in San Francisco, blonde, more conservative clothing. "And the ethical violations?" "That part was true. She was on my research team for a clinical trial. We caught her falsifying data to make our results look more promising. She was trying to impress the pharmaceutical sponsor." I shook my head, processing this new information. "Why didn't you tell me?" "At first, I wasn't certain it was the same person. Then, as we got closer, I worried you'd think I was dating you because of some vendetta against her." Samantha looked directly at me. "That's not why I'm with you, Garrett." Before I could respond, the ballroom doors burst open. Ryan stormed out, his face flushed with anger, Jessica hurrying behind him. Several guests followed, clearly hoping to witness the confrontation. "You son of a bitch!" Ryan shouted, marching toward me. "You ruined our wedding day!" I stood my ground as he approached. "I didn't say a word in there, Ryan. You're the one who decided to humiliate me in front of everyone. Because you brought her." He gestured wildly at Samantha. "You orchestrated this whole thing." "I had no idea they knew each other," I said evenly. "But even if I had, how would that compare to what you did to me? You stole my fiancée, took our wedding date, and then invited me to watch." Jessica had reached us now, tears streaking her makeup. "It wasn't like that, Garrett. We fell in love. It just happened." "Nothing just happens, Jessica." I echoed the words I'd said to her months before. "You make choices." A small crowd had gathered around us now, including my parents. My mother looked horrified by the public scene, while my father watched with an unreadable expression. "What exactly happened in San Francisco, Jessica?" Ryan demanded, turning to her. "What was she talking about in there?" Jessica's eyes darted nervously. "It was a misunderstanding. Office politics." She falsified research data, Samantha stated clearly. Data for a clinical trial testing a drug for Alzheimer's patients. People's lives were at stake. Jessica's father, Douglas Reed, pushed through the crowd. That's enough. This is my daughter's wedding day, and I won't have it ruined by ancient history. Ancient history? Samantha raised an eyebrow. It was less than 2 years ago. And it wasn't the only incident. Was it, Jessica? There was also the matter of the missing research grant funds. Jessica's mother, Martha, gasped. Jessica, what is she talking about? Nothing. Jessica cried. She's lying to hurt me because I'm with Ryan now. I looked at Jessica, really looked at her. The woman I'd planned to marry, who I'd believed was honest and good, suddenly seemed like a stranger. How had I never seen this side of her? I didn't come here to expose Jessica's past, I said quietly. I came to show both of you that what you did didn't destroy me. But I'm beginning to think you did me a favor by showing your true colors before we got married. Ryan's anger seemed to deflate suddenly, replaced by confusion as he looked between Jessica and Samantha. What missing funds? Ask your wife, my father said, stepping forward. After all, you've made your choice, just like she made hers. Ryan stared at Jessica, who was now sobbing openly. Let's go inside, he muttered, taking her arm. We have guests. As they turned to leave, my father approached me. I owe you an apology, Garrett. I should have supported you from the beginning. He extended his hand, which I took after a moment's hesitation. Why didn't you? I asked, the question that had bothered me for months. He sighed heavily. Ryan has always been challenging. Your mother and I found it easier to placate him than confront him. That was our mistake, and you paid the price for it. My mother joined us, embracing me tightly. We're so proud of you, she whispered. And your date is lovely. Jessica's parents approached next, looking deeply uncomfortable. Douglas cleared his throat. I want to apologize for what happened in there. We had no idea about any of this. Martha nodded. Jessica told us you two had simply grown apart. If we'd known the truth. I assured them no apology was necessary. As they walked away, Martha turned back briefly. Dr. Wells, was it true what you said? About the research? Samantha nodded once. Martha's expression hardened as she looked toward the ballroom where her daughter had disappeared. The crowd around us gradually dispersed, returning to the reception or leaving altogether. Samantha and I stood alone in the parking lot, the events of the day hanging between us. I should probably explain everything, she said quietly. Not here, I replied, opening my car door. Let's go somewhere quiet. We drove to a small restaurant about 20 minutes from the resort. A waterfront place with outdoor seating and enough privacy for a difficult conversation. Over plates of food neither of us really touched, Samantha told me the full story. I recognized Jessica from your photos when we first met. I was shocked. Seattle is a big city, and the coincidence seemed impossible. I wasn't going to say anything. But then you mentioned the wedding, and I thought you deserved to know who you were really dealing with. So you suggested coming to the wedding to expose her? I asked, trying to understand. No, Samantha said firmly. I suggested coming to support you. I had no intention of saying anything about our past. But when Ryan humiliated you like that, I couldn't stay silent. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception but finding only earnestness. So our meeting at the coffee shop. Complete coincidence, she assured me. Though I admit I was curious about you once I realized the connection. But Garrett, what's developed between us is real. At least for me. I reached across the table for her hand. For me too. I just needed to be sure. We sat in silence for a while, watching the moonlight on the water. Despite the chaos of the day, I felt strangely at peace. What do you think is happening back at the reception? Samantha finally asked. I shrugged. Ryan is probably demanding explanations. Jessica is probably minimizing everything. They might be fighting, or they might be uniting against a common enemy, us. Does it matter? I considered the question carefully. No, I realized. It doesn't matter at all. We decided to head back to Seattle rather than staying at the resort as originally planned. The drive was quiet but comfortable, both of us processing the events of the day. No regrets about coming? I asked as we neared the city. Samantha smiled. None. Though I'm sorry if I made things more complicated for you with your family. You didn't, I assured her. If anything, you helped clear the air. My father actually apologized, which might be a first. We arrived at her apartment building around midnight. I walked her to her door, suddenly unsure about where we stood after the revelations of the day. Would you like to come in for coffee? She asked. Real coffee, I mean. I think we could both use it after today. Inside her apartment, modern minimalist with medical textbooks lining one wall, we talked until sunrise. About Jessica, about Ryan, about our own past relationships and betrayals. But mostly about ourselves, our hopes, dreams, and the unexpected connection we'd found amid the chaos. As morning light filtered through her windows, I realized something profound. The wedding that should have been my worst nightmare had instead given me clarity. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt genuinely grateful it had happened. Otherwise, I might never have met Samantha. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't mine, life had taken turns I never could have predicted. Spring had arrived in Seattle, bringing cherry blossoms to the University of Washington campus where Samantha and I were walking one Sunday afternoon. Have you heard from them? Samantha asked, knowing she didn't need to specify who them was. My mother mentioned they're in couples counseling, I replied. Apparently, there have been trust issues since the wedding. Samantha raised an eyebrow. Imagine that. After the wedding incident, the fallout had been substantial. Jessica's parents had insisted on a full explanation about the San Francisco situation, which led to revelations about other ethical lapses in her past. Ryan had been forced to confront the fact that the woman he betrayed me for had her own history of deception. They remained married. But according to family gossip, things were strained. Jessica had been passed over for a promotion at her marketing firm after her past professional issues came to light. Ryan had reached out to me once, a rambling late-night text that was part accusation, part apology. I never responded. My relationship with my parents had improved dramatically. My father and I started meeting monthly for lunch, conversations gradually evolving from surface pleasantries to meaningful discussions. He'd finally acknowledged his role in enabling Ryan's behavior throughout our childhood, and though it didn't erase the past, it helped heal old wounds. Do you ever regret not having a big wedding? I asked Samantha as we paused to watch a group of students playing frisbee. She laughed. After attending theirs? Not even slightly. Our relationship had progressed naturally after the wedding confrontation. What might have broken a new couple instead solidified us. 3 months after the wedding, Samantha had moved into my apartment, bringing her collection of medical journals and surprising fondness for 80s action movies. Work had flourished for both of us. I'd been promoted to development director, leading a team creating financial security software used by banks across the country. Samantha had received a grant to continue her research on neural pathways in dementia patients, work that could potentially help thousands. More importantly, I'd learned to trust again. The betrayal by Jessica and Ryan had nearly convinced me that relationships weren't worth the risk. Samantha had shown me otherwise, that honesty and mutual respect weren't mythical concepts but the foundation of something real. Trevor texted this morning, I mentioned as we continued our walk. Final fittings for the tuxedos are next Tuesday. Trevor and Amanda were getting married in May, and I was serving as best man. Samantha had been included in the bridal party after becoming fast friends with Amanda. I still need to pick up my dress, Samantha noted. Want to come with me? A year ago. Such an invitation would have triggered painful memories. Now, it simply felt like a normal part of life. The shadows cast by betrayal had receded, no longer darkening every experience. My therapy sessions with Dr. Marquez had concluded 3 months prior, with her assessment that I'd processed the trauma healthily. Betrayal changes you, she'd said in our final session. The trick is making sure it changes you for the better. And it had. I was more discerning about who I trusted, but not closed off. More aware of red flags in relationships, but not paranoid. More appreciative of honesty, but not demanding perfection. Surprisingly, Ryan and I had begun tentatively rebuilding our relationship. It started with a chance encounter at our parents' house during Christmas. The conversation had been awkward but civil. Since then, we'd exchanged occasional texts and even met for coffee once. The competitive dynamic that defined our childhood had dissolved, replaced by cautious respect. Do you think you'll ever fully forgive them? Samantha asked, reading my thoughts as she often did. I already have. I realized aloud. Not for their sake, but for mine. Carrying that anger was exhausting. We reached the university's fountain, where a small girl was tossing pennies into the water, making wishes with each throw. What would you wish for? I asked Samantha, handing her a penny from my pocket. She considered for a moment, then tossed it in. Can't tell you or it won't come true. Very superstitious for a scientist. I teased. I believe in covering all my bases, she replied with a smile. Science, luck. Whatever works. That evening, at Trevor and Amanda's pre-wedding dinner, I found myself giving an impromptu toast to the couple. Looking around the table at friends who had supported me through the darkest period of my life, with Samantha beside me, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. To finding the right people, I said, raising my glass, and to recognizing them when you do. Later that night, as Samantha and I walked home under Seattle's characteristic light drizzle, I reflected on how dramatically life had changed in a year. The wedding invitation that had seemed like salt in a wound had actually been the catalyst for something beautiful. Penny for your thoughts, Samantha said, squeezing my hand. I was just thinking about how sometimes the worst things lead to the best things, I replied. If Ryan and Jessica hadn't betrayed me, if they hadn't sent that invitation, if you hadn't spilled my coffee. A lot of ifs, she noted. All leading to now. I finished. And now is pretty great. As we reached our apartment building, I paused. What did you wish for at the fountain? Samantha smiled. This, she said simply. Just this. Life wasn't perfect. There were still moments when memory ambushed me, when trust felt fragile, when the past echoed in unexpected ways. But those moments no longer defined me. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead revealed my capacity for resilience, forgiveness, and growth. That, perhaps, was the greatest lesson, that even the deepest wounds can become the foundation for something stronger, something truer than what existed before. Not despite the scars, but because of them. Have you ever experienced betrayal that eventually led to something better in your life? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes our most painful moments become our greatest turning points. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible. Thank you for listening, and remember, the best revenge really is living well.